Financial stress on the parents translates into physiological stress in the children. They didn't inherit anything in terms of a disease. They're just reacting to the environment.
People call Dr. Gabor Mate the people whisperer.
Legendary thinker and best-selling author.
He's highly sought after for his expertise on addiction, stress, and childhood development.
The evidence linking mental illness and childhood adversity is about as strong as the evidence linking smoking and lung cancer, and the average physician doesn't hear a word about that. It's astonishing. I can give you the example of Donald Trump. I mean, his father was a psychopath.
You are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
For him, these were not choices so much as survival techniques. And financial stress on the parents translates into physiological stress in the children. They didn't inherit anything in terms of a disease. They're just reacting to the environment. It's a defense against reality, and it's a defense against being judged. You know, well, that says something about my childhood. You know, nobody's born a liar. As we say in this book, there are congenital liars, but there are no congenital liars. No one-day-old baby tells any lies. No one-day-old baby pretends anything. If we end up pretending in any way at all, to the extent that we do, it's because we had to learn that's what we must do to survive.
You said something at the start when I gave the example that I sat with a guest here who went through domestic abuse, and they are the calmest person. And then you said, well, maybe they're suppressing it. And in fact, the minute you said that, it reminded me of something they said, which is they said to me on this podcast that they had angry outbursts all the time. So sometimes their child will come up to them and want to play when they're working, and they'll snap.
Yeah,
and they're trying to deal with that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That they're sitting on this volcanic crater of anger, which sometimes bursts out of them. So their demeanor is like a really developed, suppressed way of handling rage. Which rage, when they were children, had they expressed, would have got them into more trouble. So suppressing it, repressing it, became their survival. It's all about survival, you see. So it became their survival mechanism. Now, that person, as long as they keep it that way, they're at risk. They're at risk for mental health diagnoses like depression. Because what is depression? It means you're pushing something down. That's what it means. What to be pushed down? Our natural emotions. Why do we push them down? Because we had to survive. So that person, I don't know, I can't prognosticate. Yeah. It's a defense against reality, and it's a defense against being judged. You know, well, that says something about my childhood. You know, nobody's born a liar. As we say in this book, there are congenital liars, but there are no congenital liars. No one-day-old baby tells any lies. No one-day-old baby pretends anything. If we end up pretending in any way at all, to the extent that we do, it's because we had to learn that's what we must do to survive.
Stress of abuse is destroying you. If you're in an abusive relationship, this will be very important for you to listen to. If you know someone who's in an abusive relationship, be a good one to share. Your abuser's behavior is doing you harm, serious, debilitating harm. Let me give you some trauma facts. Dr. Clarke does his research. There is a direct correlation between trauma and physical health conditions. I could give you study after study of this. The trauma causes it, and you're in trauma if you live with an abuser. Diabetes, COPD, heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, you name it. And trauma is causing this physical issue. Wherever you are weak physically, genetically, and families have weaknesses, that's where the trauma of abuse will attack you. If you live with an abuser, you have PTSD. I'm telling you, post-traumatic stress disorder, no question. In fact, your PTSD is worse than PTSD that occurs after only one awful traumatic event. Okay, that's bad enough. Your abuse is ongoing. Your trauma never stops. You will suffer depression, anxiety, memory and concentration problems, obsessive negative thoughts. Sound familiar? The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration describes trauma this way. events or circumstances experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, which result in adverse effects on the individual's functioning and well-being. Okay, bottom line is you're being destroyed. Physically, emotionally, they don't mention spiritual because it's not a spiritual organization, but emotional, physical, and spiritual damage and destruction. This describes you, doesn't it? Look, we all deal with stress. It's a normal part of life. The stress of living with an abuser is not normal. It is abnormal. It is constant. It's severe. It's damaging. All the clients I work with, in person or by telephone, who live with an abuser tell me they are not doing a good job in any area of their lives. The breakdown is across the board. They're having trouble at work if they work outside the home. They're having difficulty raising their kids and being the loving moms they want to be. They're not as close to their friends. They're feeling distant and awkward with their families. They're struggling to serve God in their church. My response to these clients' terrible strain and unhappiness is this: I believe you. You're credible. You give me a very specific description of what you're living with. You aren't able to do a good job in any of these areas. The stress of living with your abuser is taking a toll on you across the board. No part of your life escapes the impact of his abuse. Of course, your abuser feels fine. He sleeps at night. He feels no pain. His physical health isn't affected by your lousy marriage because he doesn't get it. When you only have a conscience, nothing bothers you. And everything's your fault anyway, from his point of view. Spiritually, he's actually a terrible mess, but he would never believe that. When you don't have the capacity to truly care about someone else, nothing that happens to that person bothers you. He could care less that you're miserable and lonely and breaking down. He believes that's your problem, that it's all in your head, that it's all your fault. You are losing yourself, abused spouse. Man or woman, you are being broken down day by day, month by month, year by year, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. You will reach the point, if you have not already, where you don't recognize yourself anymore. You're allowing him to rip from you your self-worth, your identity, your sense of value as a person, your feelings of dignity. Soon there will be nothing left of you. He's taking everything from you. You're not living, you're surviving, barely. Here's what one woman told me about the abuse she has lived with in her marriage. This could be you. We've been married 20 years, she said. It took me 15 years to figure out that my husband was an abuser. So many ladies aren't even aware of it. Even men, wouldn't even call it abuse, don't want to go there. She says, I didn't want to see that or believe it, that it was abuse. It took another 5 years to completely grasp and accept his unwillingness even to acknowledge his treatment of me and to change. I spent years suppressing his painful words and actions, trying to forget many of the nasty things he'd done to me and our kids. She continues, this relationship has cost me everything. She started to cry at this point. I am at a point now where I would rather not live than wake up one more day living in fear, isolation, and misery. That's a breakdown. I feel like I'm trapped in a prison. The pain is so consuming and overwhelming. I can't see how my heart can bear any more pain. I have surrendered my life for him, speaking about her abuser. I gave up my dreams for him to pursue his needs and desires. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm not the person I once was. Now that, if you want sad, that's sad. I'm saying to yourself, I'm saying to this lady, I'm telling you, don't lose yourself. Every woman I've helped escape from her abuser has said these same things to me. Once you're out, here's what I'm told. I feel so much better. I didn't realize how sick I was until I left him. I am regaining my physical health. I have a lot more energy now. I am actually happy for the first time in a long time. I'm closer to God, which is so important to me. I feel like I've gotten myself back. My emotional issues are clearing up. I can see a bright future now. That could be you and needs to be you. It isn't easy to realize all the awful damage your abuser is inflicting on you. It's hard to accept that this abuse is causing you to die a slow, painful death, but it is. My job is to convince you of that. And God says, here's the good news. God says you don't have to keep suffering.
Awareness, you've said before this book that awareness is the starting point.
Yeah.
I found that to be so true in my life, but it's not very easy. I feel like awareness is a luxury or a privilege that is very hard fought.
Yeah.
Because you're guessing.
Yeah.
You're guessing based on pattern recognition. So I was guessing 25 years old, I can't get into a relationship. Anytime a girl comes near me, even if I've pursued her, I run off. And to figure out why I was doing that, to even identify the behavior pattern and go, that's not helpful. That's not going to lead me to feeling whole.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Took 25 years and a lot of like introspection. But most people they're living unaware of the
Yeah.
puppet master
Yeah.
of trauma that is driving their life.
That's a really good analogy. The trauma really is like a puppet master behind the scenes in the unconscious, pulling your strings, and you're not aware of it. You know, do you remember Pinocchio?
Yeah.
So you remember what Pinocchio says at the end, when he finally becomes a real boy?
Yeah.
He says, "How foolish I was when I was a puppet." And to the extent that we're being activated by these unconscious strings that our trauma is pulling behind the scenes, and we're acting in our lives and we think we're autonomous, free beings, but we're actually being controlled by something in the past that we haven't worked out, we're puppets. We're actually puppets. And there's not much freedom in that. There's no freedom in it at all. So, I mean, I suppose the opposite of trauma, if you want to revisit that question, is liberation.
Interesting. Liberation and by reconnection.
By reconnection, but liberation from the inexorable power of the unconscious.
Which is like cutting the strings in a way. Kind of brings me to, there's kind of two ways I want to go with that. But the first question I have about trauma and the puppet master analogy is, do we ever really cut the strings? Or do we just kind of learn to pull against them when they try and tell us to do something with more force than they're exerting in the opposite direction?
That doesn't work very well, pushing against it, because that's still reactive. You're still not in charge. You're just in automatic resistance mode to something. There's no freedom in that either, you know?
So still up.
So, yeah. But awareness that you mentioned is huge, because once you're aware that there's this... See, the thing about these strings may not fray right away, but once you're aware that, this reaction of mine, it's not about what's going on right now. There's something old being activated here. That awareness alone it slackens the strings a bit. Now they're no longer as taut. They're no longer as automatically capable of pulling on you. So it does have to begin with awareness of them. Ultimately, if we realize that this puppet master is just a desperate little person trying to get you to survive, the only way he, she, they knew how when they were small, if we make friends with it, but we relieve it of its duties, saying thanks very much, but I can handle it now, it eventually becomes our friend rather than sort of our master, you know?
On that first step of just acknowledging, just understanding that there is a puppet master there controlling us, and exactly which strings that puppet master is pulling in our lives, how does one go about awareness, the process of awareness? Is it introspection, keeping a diary, therapy? What is it?
Well, all that. I mean, all or any. But even when you ask how you go about it, what is the it? Well, for you to say how to go about it, you already must have some degree of awareness. If you didn't, you wouldn't even be asking the question. So that's the very first step of realizing that there's something here to work on. There's something here to work through. It does not need to be the way it is. That already is the biggest step. The Buddha said that to recognize the source of your suffering is the first step towards relieving the suffering. And so as soon as you ask how you go about it, you've already taken a huge step. Because a lot of people don't even know that there's an it. They just think this is reality, that this is life. So realizing that this it doesn't have to be the way it is, that's already a huge step. Now, beyond that, yoga, meditation, nature, therapy of all kinds, body work of all kinds, like somatic experiencing, or craniosacral treatments, or even massage therapy. It's incredible what can be revealed just through body work like that. Then all kinds of forms of therapy, the ones I teach, the ones other people teach, journaling, certain exercises in this book that we recommend, like just ask yourself where you have trouble saying no in life to things you don't really want to do, and working that through on a regular basis. So there's lots of ways once you open the door. You know, I have a chapter on psychedelics here, which is, again, it's not like a panacea or for everyone, but certainly it's a helpful modality for a lot of people. So Some people may actually benefit from taking pharmaceutical medications if their situation is dire enough, but not as the final answer, but as a way of getting respite that allowed them to go to work on the real issues that caused them to be depressed or anxious or tuning out, so any and all of these things.
A lot of people don't even want to open those doors though, because there's so much pain associated with maybe going back or revisiting an early experience that they just think it's better keep the doors shut.
Yeah.
And get to tomorrow.
That's true. To which I have two answers. One is, it's true, it's painful. Because all the pain you didn't want to feel and you've been running away from through your compensatory behaviors, like your addictions, are nothing but an attempt to escape from pain. That's all they are. That's all they're not a disease. They're not a genetic, whatever it is. Addictions are very simply an attempt to escape pain, which create more pain. But that's what they are. And so we get addicted to work, to sex, to pornography, to gambling, to the internet, to shopping, to eating, to power.
On that point, I find it so fascinating. When you mentioned in your previous book that, you classified things like food, social media, shopping, porn and work as types of addiction, that was that in and of itself was a bit of a revelation for me, because I never saw work as an addiction. The minute you said it was, and I kind of link it to, heroin addiction, which is providing a certain psychological or physiological benefit to me.
Yeah, temporarily.
Yeah. Of course it's a fucking addiction. Of course work is an addiction. Of course I have that addiction.
Well, work can be an addiction.
Yeah.
Work can also be sacred. It can also be fulfilling and a manifestation of your creative urges. But it's not but it's strange to say, not that I recommend it, but it's possible even to use heroin in a non-addictive way. I don't personally get it, and I would never want to, but the addiction is never in the behavior itself, it's in your relationship to the behavior. So if the particular activity gives you temporary relief or pleasure, and therefore you crave it, but it causes harm in the long term and you can't give it up, you've got an addiction. And I don't care what the activity is, could be drugs and all the other things that we mentioned. And it employs the same brain circuits, by the way. The workaholic is after the same brain chemical that the cocaine addict is after, dopamine, And people can be even addicted to their own stress hormones, like adrenaline, the so-called adrenaline junkies. There's such a thing, So almost anything can be addictive if it serves the purpose of temporarily easing some distress, but causing harm in the long term.
Is escapism the right word to use then for it? Because it doesn't sound as much like we're escaping rather than we are seeking something.
We're seeking relief from a certain mental state. Like I just gave you a definition of addiction, so I don't know what addictions you've had or haven't besides, but what did that do for you? Temporarily. It gave you something.
It made me feel like I was valid and I was pursuing a sense of accomplishment and validation.
Okay,
and
give a sense of worth.
I was worthy.
No. Is that something that people need or not?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing. But the real question is, why did you ever get the idea that you didn't have the worth? Why did I get the idea that I didn't have the worth? That's where trauma comes in.
Because I was called the N-word when I was 8 by a kid in school.
Exactly.
And then no one would speak to me
And because
that
your
day.
mother screamed at your father.
Yeah.
And so
vividly.
all that together. And that's emotionally painful. Like, what's it feel like to be, not to have a sense of worth? That's painful. And so that's why my mantra is, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And if you want to understand why the pain, you have to look at that person's life.
And what the benefit of the addiction is. That's something that you say in previous book that I found, it's a flipping of narrative where you say we should be asking what the benefit of the addiction is.
Well, and like in your case, it gives me a sense of worth. Well, okay, I'll say to you, if you come to me because you say, like, I'm workaholic, it's causing some harm in my life, it's keeping me from intimate relationships, it makes me stressed and tired, whatever it is, it's the first thing I would ask of you is, what is it doing for you? And you say a sense of worth. And I'd say, you know what? You deserve to have a sense of worth. I totally understand why you'd want to engage in an activity that gives it to you. But given that it's causing you harm, let's look at why you don't have a sense of worth and how else you might develop it that isn't harmful to you, you know? So, but you start with what's right about it. What are you looking for? And what you're looking for is always valid.
And how would one go about getting that sense of worth? I'm asking for a friend.
Well, that would be a matter of some form of work. People who meditate often deal with that issue through the meditation. Not always. Certainly therapy, you know. By recognizing also that what you're doing to get the sense of worth doesn't really do it for you, just by getting honest about it, you know. So there's all kinds of ways, but the first step is the recognition.
That's the first step that you say is missing from the book, which is that sort of awareness.
Yeah.
The next thing, which it's been really front of mind in my life recently, because I've been asked this a few times on stage, and I've been trying to find the words to really articulate the importance of it, is, and this is one of your forays in this book about how to heal, is authenticity.
Yeah.
Really interesting concept, because I've been trying to articulate why the fact that I've just shared all this stuff with you,
Yeah.
and the fact that I do this every week,
Yeah.
I'm getting closer and closer to that sort of authentic self where there's really, the mask is kind of dropping on me. Why that's been so healing for me. Why is authenticity such a good way, an important way for us to heal?
It's much more than a way for us to heal. It's actually who we are. Like what you're really asking is, why is it important for a creature to be true to its own nature? Because that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to be here as ourselves, you know. And when we're not ourselves because we had to abandon ourselves or betray ourselves or disconnect from ourselves in order to survive, we lost connections with our essence. And I mean, how does it feel to be a successful CEO and, you know, more than realizing your financial dreams, but to be a workaholic and not to be available to yourself in areas of your life that really matter to you, as opposed to being honest about your stuff, sharing it with other people, dropping the veil, I mean, to answer your question, what does it feel like? I mean, can you sense the difference in your body?
It feels lighter.
Well, yeah.
Expansive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important.
So many of us live inauthentic lives because, as you said, it's either because from an early age we were escaping some kind of, you know, reality in order to help us to survive, or then the other thing that happens a bit later on in life is we develop an identity which becomes a career, which becomes a social circle, which becomes a prison of our inauthentic selves. We get trapped in there, you know, because I was good at something, or because I felt accepted in this job as a lawyer. So I am now living inauthentically as this robot in this prison. And there's often a real perception of risk and loss and danger of trying to get out of that prison, of trying to get close to our authentic selves. We feel like we'll lose our friendship circle. We'll feel like we'll let our parents down who wanted us to become a lawyer. You know, all of these things. I guess you see that a lot in your work.
Well, there is that risk, but here's the issue. As a child, you had no choice but to go for acceptance and being approved of and being received under any conditions. No matter what you had to give up of your authenticity, you had to give up your authenticity. You had no choice in the matter. At a certain point as adults, we learn that this lack of authenticity, this disconnection from ourselves, this separation from our gut feelings is costing us. It's costing us in terms of our physical health, our peace of mind, our relationship, our mental health, and so on. You'll never be as vulnerable again as you were when you were a child. You'll never be as helpless, as dependent, as resourceless. No, it's true that if you developed a whole set of relationships based on your inauthentic persona, some people in your life may not like it if you gradually move towards authenticity. They may not like it. It's not what they wanted from you. You're going to find out who your friends are. You're really going to find, because your real friends will say, oh, we're so happy for you. We were waiting for this. Other friends will say, it's not what I signed up for. You know, the question is, you still have to decide. As an infant, as a young child, I had no agency in the choice between authenticity and attachment. Now I do. Which one do I want to go with? What is the cost of being inauthentic? Now, I can't make that decision for anybody else. Nobody can make that decision for anybody else. But most people will find that choosing authenticity has benefits way beyond whatever they might lose. That's what I find.
And you said the word there, agency, which is the second of the 4 A's on how to heal. Now, agency, when I read that word, I hear like personal responsibility, taking personal responsibility over my life.
Exactly. Which also means not letting, you don't use you don't wear trauma as a badge, or you don't use it as a get out of jail pass in a game of Monopoly. Oh, I was traumatized, so I can't be any other way,
Giving all the power to the puppet master.
Yeah, exactly. So agency means actually I take responsibility, not for what happened to me, not even how I interpreted the world as a result, going backwards, but how I interpret the world from now on. Do I still want to interpret the world and my role in it based on some decision I made when I was a 1-year-old? That's where agency comes in. Agency also means that if I have any kind of dysfunction or illness, it's not just that I put my hands in the hands of put my fate in the hands of a physician or a healer, but I have I make the decisions. I listen to your advice. I accept some, I don't accept some, but I'm the one who's making the decisions along with what seems right to me. So agency.
Steer clear. Keep your life free of narcissists as much as possible and abusive behaving people. Okay? Very important. Now, why do I say that? Because as you're dealing with symptoms of PTSD and complex PTSD, you will continue to put yourself right smack in the middle of narcissistic injury over and over and over. And you will be cutting yourself off at the knee in your support base. You're trying to build your support base now, right? If you have narcissists all around you and you keep giving place to them, whether it's your mama, your daddy, your siblings, cousins, uncle, whoever, right? Then you're really not doing yourself any service as far as like your support base goes. Right now, you're building a support base to help you deal with trauma, to help you deal with all of the dysfunctional relationships you had in the past. And some of you right now, you have it. This is why sometimes you're frustrated and angry and you feel certain ways, but you're not quite conscious to how you're feeling. And it's just like you're sliding down this slippery slope and it's hard to hold on and grasp to anything. Seems like the harder you try, the more you get kicked back. Let me give you a secret. Okay, this is something I had to figure out for myself. It's because you keep giving place unconsciously. You keep giving place to people like narcissists and abusive behaving individuals who will exploit you. Okay, and they're very unresponsive. This is why we don't get support from them. Very unresponsive. Argumentative. Bringing up the past, things that they secretly know hurt you, but they keep bringing it up because they want more narcissistic injury. Boundary issues being broken or torn down. See, all of these things punch holes into your support base. You want a strong support base. This is what I had to figure out, guys. And I got busy.